Shirley, did you sign in?
No, I'm
The public, sorry, the public.
Oh, sure.
Before we start the hearing, if there's any members of the public that would like to be able to speak during the meeting, please make sure that you signed in when you came in. If you haven't already, please do. Okay, it's 1:30. I'll call the meeting of the McHenry County Zoning Board of Appeals to order. The purpose for our hearing today is application 2024-006. It's a request for a conditional use permit to allow for a commercial solar energy facility. The applicant is TPEIL MH459 LLC. The PIN number for this property is 13-28-200-013. The property is located on Lucas Road, and it consists of approximately 43.461 acres located on the south side of Lucas Road, approximately 4,000 feet east of the intersection of Lucas Road and Illinois Route 47 in Door Township, Illinois. I'd like to introduce the board and have them announce their name and the township in which they reside, starting on my left. Mr. Jers.
Thomas Jers from Coral Township.
Robert Cozen, Algonquin Township.
Charlie Eldridge, Richmond Township.
I'm Linnea Kuster from Alden Township.
Vicki Gardner from Nunda Township.
Kurt Schnabel, Riley Township.
Jessica Beverly, Door Township.
This petition has been reviewed and the following items have been received prior to today's scheduled hearing. A publisher's certificate of publication from a newspaper is dated February 28, 2024 and thereby meets ordinance requirements. The affidavit of posting was signed and the date posted was February 28, 2024 and thereby meets ordinance requirements. The affidavit of mailing was signed and the date mailed was February 23, 2024, thereby meeting ordinance requirements. The survey has been checked against the petition, legal notice, and publication in the newspaper, and all three match. Filing fees have been paid. The endangered species consultation was received for this petition. The McHenry County Soil and Water Conservation District report has been received. For further information, refer to NRI number 23-091-4551. Many of you have never been to a zoning hearing before, so I'd just like to explain to you a little bit how the hearing works. So the petitioner will give us their testimony why they think this conditional use should be granted. They will be asked questions from the Zoning Board of Appeals and staff. And then at that time, if any of you have questions regarding his testimony, then you would be allowed to do so. You would have to come up to the front, state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes to ask questions. Again, this is only for questions. Later in the hearing, you'll have 3 minutes to give your comments, how you feel about the petition at that time. And so after the questions are all finished, then we will take testimony from staff on their report, and then we will take your comments. So that's how the hearing works. So anyone that will be asking questions or giving testimony or giving a statement, I would like to swear you in at this time, so please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. So then we'll just turn it over to the petitioner. Please introduce yourselves, and also this is being recorded, although all the members are here to vote, so it's not such an issue. But if just one of you speaks at a time, that's helpful for the recording.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the board, my name is Kyle Berry. I'm an attorney with the law firm of McGuire Woods LLP. I'm representing the applicant in connection with the petition this afternoon. With me today, I have Gloria Foxman with who works for the applicant, and Amy Henry, who works for Kimley Horn, which is an engineering and consulting firm that helps with project development and design issues. What we'd like to do first this morning is have Ms. Foxman begin by taking you through a PowerPoint presentation that provides an overview of the project and generally discusses how we believe the project meets the standards required for the issuance of a permit. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Ms. Foxman, who will cover part of the PowerPoint presentation, followed by Ms. Henry.
Go right ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Gloria Foxman. So I work for Turning Point Energy. I'm representing the Project LLC here today. I wanted to tell you about the project and some of the benefits, and also to address some of the points we received in the objection letter. Next slide. So first of all, Turning Point, we're an independent energy company. We try as much as possible to take a collaborative approach, which is why we've been speaking with planning staff extensively.
Just speak a little louder.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry. We've been speaking with planning staff extensively. We hope to work well with the neighbors that we'll speak with here today. We try to design projects that are harmonious with their surroundings. We use native pollinator-friendly plantings underneath the panels and around the project. And then we also, when we're successful in developing a project, we love to do a community investment in that community to try to be a good neighbor. So that's nonprofits or initiatives like the fire department or the elementary school. So if you could switch to the next slide. These are some of the organizations we've contributed to. We've, according to my one of my colleagues' tally, Turning Point Energy and our partners have provided over $2.1 million in community investment so far, and we have a goal of getting that up to $3 million by 2026. Next slide, please. I am aware that this board is very familiar with community solar, so for anyone who's here, I just want to mention that community solar projects are smaller. Obviously, you're very familiar with the parcel, but smaller than the much larger, utility scale projects that many may be familiar with. And it allows people who don't want to have solar panels on their roof for whatever reason to still benefit from solar energy. You can subscribe through ComEd, and typically subscribers receive a discount off the normal rate. We think it'll be anywhere from 5 to 10%, but that's in ComEd's hands, so not 100% sure about that. Next slide, please. So Amy, my colleague, Amy Henry, is going to go over the site plan specifically. I just wanted to show the project in its context in the surrounding area. The actual array itself is approximately 26.6 acres. We've proposed to screen it with a fence and a vegetative buffer, and we've observed the required setbacks. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, I think I'm used to this. Anyway, I'll try to be louder. This project could benefit McHenry County residents in several ways. We plan to use local people to construct this project. So you see up there, it's 50 to 75 jobs over 12 to 18 months. It's not 12 to 18 months of construction. That's the time period. There's a lot of waiting for parts to come in and doing one part and then getting that inspected and then waiting for more parts to come in. So I was checking with my engineer, my in-house engineer just this morning, and he was saying the actual construction days are more like 3 to 6 months. But we give that window to communicate how long it would be till the project is actually done. I mentioned there's the opportunity for electricity savings for people who subscribe. The project would also increase the tax revenue generated from the parcel. So we project that in the first year, the tax revenue generated would increase by 27 times. And then there's the benefits of renewable energy itself, which has reduced greenhouse gas emissions compared to other ways of producing energy. Increased grid resiliency. We've gone through an extensive study process with ComEd where we have to do improvements in order to get onto the grid, and that will stay past the life of the project. And then, of course, environmental benefits such as increased pollinator habitat, and our plantings, we project, will improve soil health and reduce erosion. So this slide goes into that a little bit more. We included a study that shows that these kinds of plantings can provide similar benefits to a conservation reserve program. Next slide. We also conducted a glare study. So you can see we did the whole route of Lucas Road and then 14 observation points around the project. And we predict zero glare throughout, a calendar year.
And that's a desktop study, is that right?
That's correct.
Using basically glare predicting software?
Correct. And my engineer did that. I did not do that. So how is a solar farm as a neighbor? Quiet and screened is our goal. Once the project is constructed, there's no increase in long-term traffic. Unlike other forms of development, we don't use water or sewer. We've complied with Illinois noise standards. I mentioned there wouldn't be any emissions or glare. And then our plantings would provide screening and would improve the health of the soil. So I'm now going to get into just some specific responses to the objection letter we received. I really hope that these comments can provide additional context and maybe allay some fears, which is my goal.
Well, first of all, I think the property value impact study was submitted as an appendix part of the application, correct?
It was, and then we submitted actually an updated study, so that would be the big, long property impact study that you saw. And so I just wanted to provide some context for one of the preparers of the study, Patricia Almagar, who has an incredible appraisal experience with this kind of property valuation, and was also appointed to the State Real Estate Appraisal Board and then the chairperson of the State Real Estate Appraisal Board by 2 Illinois governors. So that's the board that oversees administration, disciplinary activities, and licensing of all appraisers. Next slide. So for our property value impact study that was prepared by Cohen-Resnick, so prepared by appraisers who are well-versed in this kind of appraising, I just wanted to note that they reviewed published academic studies, which analyzed hundreds of sales transactions. They also reviewed peer-authored studies, so studies authored by other appraisers. And then they performed 35 original studies that covered 17 states. So included in the study you received were the 10 most relevant of those 35 studies. And of those, 2 of them are before and after analyses, which means sales that happened prior to the solar project compared to sales that happened after. And they also included over 60 interviews with county and township assessors that would have familiarity with the assessed value of properties near solar projects. And I just wanted to include the conclusion there.
Just to be clear, one of the states was Illinois, correct?
Correct.
And some of the assessors that were spoken to were in counties in Illinois, correct?
Correct. So their conclusion, and I'm quoting from the experts here, was that considering all the preceding that I just mentioned at the top of the slide, the data indicates that solar facilities do not have a negative impact on adjacent property values. Next slide, please. So these were the 10 most relevant studies that they included in that property value impact study. These were original Cohen-Resnick studies. Next slide. Then, once we received the objection letter on Friday, this past Friday, we asked Cohen-Resnick to review it and help us to address some of the concerns that were raised regarding property value impact. So that's the property value impact analysis, which is the shorter letter. And that was prepared by Andrew Lines, who's a member of the Appraisal Institute and a licensed appraiser in the state of Illinois. So his conclusion, based on paired group sales of 40 solar farms, over 3,000 data points, and then similar to the property value impact study, interviews with Illinois county and township assessors and reviews of academic studies, was that there's no consistent trend indicating that new solar farm developments will have a negative impact on surrounding home values. Next slide, please. So they went into in their letter, so I'll address here as quickly as possible, the 3 studies that were mentioned in the objection letter. First is the Berkeley study. So Mr. Lines noted that study did not consider site design, setbacks, or landscaping. It covered 6 states that are not Illinois, and the author of the study mentioned that the results should not be applied to other states. And the majority of the data in that study indicates that there's no impact. Next slide, please. So the second study that was mentioned in the letter that we received was this study out of the University of Texas at Austin. That study is an opinion survey, so it's not based on sales data. And of the 400 assessors that were polled, only 37 of those assessors replied. Of the 37, only 18 had assessed a home that was near a solar farm. And of the 18, 17 found no actual impact. Thank you. The third study was the University of Rhode Island study. So that study found no negative impact to residential homes near solar arrays in rural areas. So this is Mr. Lines' analysis of the third study. Regarding property value impact, the quote was that these results suggest that the test area in rural areas is effectively 0. The impact is effectively 0. And it also found that there was no evidence of a differential property value impact based on the solar installation size, just according to this study.
And again, just to be clear, the information you're discussing right now and that's in the PowerPoint is included in Mr. Lines' letter, correct?
Correct. And as an example, sort of a case study, Mr. Lines included this development, 175 subdivision that's being built near a solar farm in Indiana. he noted that the median sale price of all the homes in that development is just under $375,000, but that the 3 homes that have sold that are abutting the solar farm have sold over that median price. Next slide, please. And then the interviews that I mentioned, he specifically cited these 4 interviews with township and county assessors in Illinois who reported no impact on property values due to solar farm proximity. So now I'm going to move on. We're going away from the Cohn-Resnick evidence and into just our responses to the other concerns that were raised in the objection letter. There was a section about concerns about fire issues, and those concerns all related to storage, lithium battery storage. So I want to be very clear, there are no lithium batteries in this project, so that's good. And then we also included in our application a study that talks about how concerns over solar fire hazards, so this is just solar arrays, we're not talking about batteries, should be limited because only a small portion of the materials in the panels are flammable. So that study there's a much longer section, but I just wanted to include that little screenshot here for this presentation, and then you received the entire study.
Now you mentioned that there won't be any lithium batteries in this project. Does the project include any storage component?
No, it does not. Thank you.
So does it include any other types of batteries?
No, it does not. Then there was a section about how to track or enforce any commitments or obligations that we make for the project LLC. So I just wanted to be very clear that all commitments and obligations attach to the project LLC, not to Turning Point Energy. So that's the same. I was trying to think of a good analogy, and it would be like if you have a house that has a tenant and you sell that house. In most leases, the lease travels with the house. It doesn't stay with just you. And I noticed that this concept was discussed in the solar projects that came before this committee on November 15th and 29th. These were 2 Pivot projects. So Pivot is a great example. They operate some of their projects, but they also operate other people's projects, and they sell some of their projects to other operators. Specifically, Turning Point Energy has partnered with Pivot as an operator. So it's, in all these cases, the obligations and the enforcement is the same. It always goes with the LLC, whether or not the same company develops permits and operates it, or if it's sold. Next slide. There was some concern about drainage. So I just wanted to note that our proposed planting plan should improve soil quality and reduce erosion as compared to the current use. We will also conduct a drain tile survey, and we have the responsibility of repairing and preserving the existing drainage.
In
And
fact,
that's part of the ag mitigation agreement.
Yes, it is. There was also concerns with that drainage that there would be toxic substances, specifically cadmium, in any drainage. So I wanted to note that cadmium is found in thin film modules. We don't use thin film modules. They're not generally used in any solar array that's ground mounted anymore. You know, things have changed a lot with solar energy rapidly. So some concerns that you might find are no longer relevant to like modern current solar technology. So silicon modules, which is what we would be using, don't contain cadmium, and they're classified as normal waste. They're not that's not a hazardous substance. And I just wanted to be very clear, we will use tier 1 silicon PV modules, not thin film modules. And then talking about legislation issues that were mentioned in the letter, we are complying with all current local and state legislation, and as a developer, that's our obligation is to do that. So now I would pass this to Amy Henry of Warren.
yeah, and Amy, I would just ask you to go ahead and introduce yourself to the board.
Hi, board members and chair. Amy Henry. I am with Kinlinghorn, who is a civil engineering firm. So we conducted some of the studies that I'll mention here, the noise analysis. We pulled together the landscape plan, the site plan, and my role on that team is the lead for our civil team.
And what's your connection specifically to this project then?
The lead on the civil team for the project.
And the civil team designs and helps with project development issues, studies, et cetera, for solar projects,
Correct.
including this one?
Yep. Thanks. All right. So as you can see, up on the slide there, the site plan, I'll just walk through some of the details here of the plan. The total parcel area is about 44 acres. The preliminary development area is about 32 acres of that. So that includes, any of the areas out to the fence, including the entrance drive, and in about 10 feet out beyond that, just to account for where they will, actually need to be during construction to construct. And then the preliminary solar area is about 27 acres, so that's the area covered by panels. The solar site will be located on agricultural land, so currently being farmed, with rural residences to the east, west, and south of the project area. And the project is designed to avoid the large wetland area that you see in the center of the south area of the project. There's also a stream in that area and some, wooded area, some trees, and the project is avoiding that area there to the south. The project is utilizing a 150-foot residential setback and a 50-foot property line setback per McHenry County Solar Ordinance. The access road and point of contact are located at the north of the property off of Lucas Road. The property is screened by a security fence that runs along the entire perimeter of the project. And then a landscape buffer that you can kind of see in green there. So it's along the north edge. It's along a little bit on the west edge where there's not already existing vegetation in that area. Down along the east side of the property where it's facing the residential home there, and then on the south, on either side of the wetland and the existing vegetation that is there. So complementing and extending that existing natural buffer in that area is some additional screening. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on the landscape plan in the next slide, but I did want to mention here while I'm talking about it that the team has looked at the screening a little bit more closely, a little bit further since we provided this site plan, and have agreed to extend that screening on the east side all the way down so that the screening will complete the east boundary there. As well on the south, you can see in the very southwest corner, it stops there because there's a farmed wetland there. With, there's some existing, shrubs there and stuff, but we can just extend the screening all the way to the west boundary there. And then finally, to provide additional screening on that very southeast corner, adding double screening there. So we've got about 20 feet of landscape screening, and we've agreed to propose 40 feet there, so just additional.
So is that east of the wetland?
East of the wetland, yes, thank you.
But you're not screening across the wetland?
Correct, yeah, there's quite a good amount of existing vegetation in that area, so short of clearing it to add more, there's nothing much more to add in that area, so. There are 2 equipment pads.
So just to be clear, Amy, sorry, just to close that off, you believe that the existing vegetation will provide significant screening as is, correct?
Right. Our team was out there in the fall to do the wetland delineation, and we at that point, as the leaves are starting to thin, there was still pretty good buffering there. I don't know what it looks like in the winter when all the leaves are down, but it's pretty dense in that area with some, closer to ground vegetation. There's 2 equipment pads located at the north end up by the driveway entranceway there. So the equipment pads are about 130 feet from the right-of-way. The home to the west is about 665 feet from those equipment pads. The home to the east is about 988 feet from the nearest equipment pad, and then the home to the south is over 1,300 feet from those equipment pads.
And you mentioned right-of-way, you mean the right-of-way for the road, correct?
Of Lucas Road.
So
Yeah.
it's farther away from the actual pavement, right?
Correct, yep. Right, next slide, please. Right, for the landscape plan, we're using 3 different types of pollinator seed mix throughout the array. There'll be seed mix for directly under and around the panels, seed mix for the open areas that you can kind of see in the pan, and then for the areas of farmed wetlands, we're proposing like a wet meadow seed mix. And then the landscape buffer will be a mix of evergreens and deciduous shrubs. And then the plan is for the project to provide maintenance to the landscaping throughout the life of the project. Next slide. So the graphic here shown shows water will run off underneath the panels that have been planted with meadow in place of row crops. And so the solar arrays will not negatively impact the aquifers because meadows have a higher rate of infiltration that will absorb more water than existing conditions and reduce the overall stormwater runoff. Planting native grasses and flowering plants is very beneficial to soil and water health, as the quick establishing and deep roots increase water filtration and filtration of stormwater and runoff. And then at a surface level, dense native plantings slow surface water flow and help hold sediment, preventing erosion or contamination of downgrade watersheds from sediment runoff. Supporting these concepts, the American Society of Civil Engineers issued an abstract titled Hydrologic Response of Solar Farms. The report analyzed the effects of solar panels over vegetated ground cover and concluded solar panels over a grassy field does not have much of an effect on the volume of runoff, the peak discharge, nor the time to peak. And then finally, I'll mention to mitigate erosion concerns during construction, an erosion control plan and SWIP will be prepared as part of final engineering.
Maybe you can explain what a SWIP is? Is that an acronym?
It is. So it is a Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, SWPPP.
And are those typically required by Illinois EPA regulations?
They are. Next slide, thanks. And then this slide just illustrates how well those native pollinators can and do grow between and underneath the panels. Native grasses and pollinators planted throughout the solar array creates a conservation area by reestablishing valuable land cover to help improve water quality, prevent soil erosion, and reduce loss of wildlife habitat. Next slide. All right. At the end of the project life cycle, the project will be decommissioned and will comply with the requirements of the AMA and McHenry County Solar Ordinance. Those county requirements include removal of all solar panels, electrical equipment, poles, piles, foundations, and conduits above and below ground. Access roads, fencing, ground cover, and landscaping may remain only if it can be shown to be consistent with the future use of the property. Next slide. And then Kimley-Horn prepared a noise study which shows that the project will comply with the Illinois Pollution Control Board noise limits. In addition, inverters will only produce noise during the day. They do shut off during the night.
And are the inverters the only equipment on the project that will generate noise?
That's correct, yep.
And again, they're located up by Lucas Road, correct?
Yes, yep. So where you can see the band, the noise bands there, that is where the equipment pad is located. Slide, thank you. As part of the project, siting and development and environmental constraint study was completed. The study included a detailed review of many areas, including the 100-year floodplain, wetlands, soils, public waterways, topography, cultural resources, and endangered species. Next slide. So Kimley-Horn conducted a level 2 wetland delineation, so that's a field delineation, and reviewed FEMA flood zone maps. The study area is not located in a 100-year floodplain, and the field delineation identified 10 farmed wetlands on site and 1 federally jurisdictional wetland, and that's that large wetland that I pointed out on the site plan, as well as one ephemeral stream. The project is designed to avoid impacts to that jurisdictional wetland and the stream. And then the agricultural wetlands are being planted with a wet meadow seed mix, as I mentioned in the landscape plan. Next slide. The project consulted with IDNR regarding state protected species and reviewed for habitat that may be suitable for federally listed species. IDNR determined adverse effects to state listed species or protected resources is unlikely and consultation is closed. And while suitable habitat for federal species may be located on the subject site, the site is currently actively being farmed and no adverse impacts are anticipated to federally listed species. Next slide. All right, and then finally, the project consulted with the Illinois State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO. The project received a response letter from SHPO that indicated no known historic properties are in the project area, and the project is exempt pursuant to the Illinois State Agency Historic Resource Preservation Act, and no further action with SHPO is required. Thank you.
Amy, I have you mentioned the wetland that you referred to earlier.
Yes.
So I think, perfect. You're one step ahead of me. Thank you. I was going to say, I think maybe the site plan would be the best slide to for you to look at while answering a couple questions.
Sure.
We talked about the stormwater and the absorption. Just to kind of a couple preliminary questions. I think you said that the planting of the pollinators under the panels should lead to increased absorption of stormwater. Is that correct?
That's right.
But let's talk quickly about the topography of the parcel on which that's going to host, that would host this project if it's approved. What's the current surface drainage? Can you tell us anything about that?
So currently the low point on the site and in this area here is that wetland and the stream. So the vast majority of our subject site flows into that wetland, as well as the areas that are around that wetland to the south as well flow into that system.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So it's basically the wetland is a bit of a bowl and the surrounding area sort of funnels into that bowl. Is that one way to describe it?
Yep.
Okay, and then there's an existing stream that flows out of the wetland to the south?
It does. So the wetland acts as a headwaters for the stream, and then the stream flows south and connects up with, I'm going to get the name of the river. I'm going to get the name of the river on the Kashani River. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And again, but it's anticipated that if the project is built and the native plants take root, that the absorption of any surface water would increase, right?
Right.
And then any water that's not absorbed would continue to flow into the wetland area as it does now, correct? Okay. Thank you. I think that concludes our presentation.
Maybe you covered this, but you covered in the principal use standards of the ordinance, you covered the application and the whole site design and safety. Maybe I missed it because I was kind of perusing some of these other items. Did you cover like the abandonment and decommissioning, just so we make sure I know you did on your application, but if you would just cover that a little bit.
Yeah, that we have.
There's a couple slides forward.
Okay, you did cover that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll start with questions from the board, starting to my right, Ms. Beverly.
Hi, thank you. So your company was founded in 2014 and you currently have 169 megawatts live, according to the application that we received, right? Okay. So you've done this before, you're familiar with how to build these correctly and how to maintain properties to standards. 2014 is a fairly long time for a solar company to have been in business in Illinois.
I agree. Let me be clear though, we did not enter Illinois in 2014.
Right.
We have only become involved with Illinois with the second round of legislation that was approved.
So 2021.
Exactly.
But in the markets that you're in, Maryland, Delaware, Maine, they have similar legislation to Illinois regarding stormwater management ordinances and requirements for maintenance.
Correct.
So you're familiar with how to run a solar farm?
Correct.
Right. Okay. And just to kind of expand on something that you said earlier, all of the conditions of the conditional use permit, all of the conditions contained in your lease, all of the county rules would follow this project no matter who owns it, and they would be subject to maintaining it and face penalty if they did not.
Correct.
Okay. And as you said, you have experience designing and operating solar farms in or near wetlands. Your company has experience designing and operating solar farms in or near wetlands.
So we don't operate the projects generally. We have on occasion, if I remember correctly, I think operated like one. So I can't claim that we have experience operating solar farms near wetlands because that's not part of our business model.
But with proper design, they operate themselves and require very little maintenance.
Yes.
So I should have asked a better question.
No.
You have experience designing solar farms consistent with stormwater management ordinances and wetland conditions.
Yes.
Okay. And according to your application, you knocked doors and met with the neighbors. Did you do that in this case?
So I was not able to knock doors for this project. To be very frank, I was going to do it on an earlier trip that had to be canceled. So by the time I was going to knock doors, we had already received these objection letters. And I spoke with my supervisor, and I just didn't want to be aggressive or off-putting in any way. So I didn't want to go knock on doors with people that I knew objected to the project.
Okay, I understand. In your application, you said that prior to starting the projects, your company usually knocked doors. So I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I personally wanted to, but anyway.
Okay.
Yes, we did call every number that I could find for people surrounding, and then we sent our own personal mailing, which is a supplement to the required legal notice.
Okay. One of the things, I'm going to bounce around a little bit because I did a lot of prep for this one. One of the things noted in the letter was wildlife corridor fencing. I'm sure you're familiar that the electrical code is sort of changing to allow for passage of small wildlife. You have it 6 to whatever, 10 inches off the ground. Would that be something you'd consider adding to your plan to alleviate those concerns?
If the electrical code would allow it, absolutely.
Yeah, we've had other applications come through where they do that.
Well, as I'm not an engineer, that was not my impression from our engineers, but I will take that back to them and say, hey.
Yeah, Illinois electrical code allows it. And other concerns that were noted by the neighbors, clearing the land is settled in the AMA and subject to Illinois laws and EPA protections, correct?
Correct.
And you would not be changing the topography of the land or the way that it currently drains to accommodate any part of this project?
That's correct.
Okay. And as you're doing any land clearing or construction, you're subject to site inspections for damage and topsoil disturbances consistent with the stormwater ordinance.
Correct, but I just want to, we're not planning on doing a ton of, okay, yes, correct.
Okay. Do you have an interconnection agreement with ComEd at present? You mentioned that you had worked with ComEd to discuss grid improvements.
We do not. We have gone through the study process. So at the end of that, we sign the interconnection agreement and then we submit our deposit.
Okay. On the buffer zones that you have here, I just want to be very clear. So what I'm looking at shows that there's a lot of trees on the west side, and you're proposing a 40-foot buffer along Lucas Road?
No.
Okay, please, can you reiterate that for me?
Sure, can I walk up here?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just have to talk about what you're pointing at so that it's on the record.
Okay. Okay, so what's shown currently on the north, and then what I described is we propose all the way down here, as well as
Why don't you start with
South
the
side.
road segment? Amy?
just the road segment. Okay, that's 20-foot buffer.
Okay?
Yep. Everything down the east side is gonna be 20 foot.
there's a small patch there to accompany what's already existing. There's existing vegetation is a 20-foot buffer. This area here will be a 20-foot buffer
That would be on the south side of the
on the
parcel.
south side. Thank you. And then
And west of
additionally,
and west of the wetland.
west of the wetland, 20-foot buffer. And then east of the wetland on the south boundary would be a 40-foot buffer.
And these buffers are in excess of what's required under the Illinois Solar Siting Act?
They would be, if they're not directly facing residential, that we're proposing some additional screening. You know, there's a driveway there, and we're being sensitive to that view all the way down the driveway. As well as, you know, this is additional residential property, so just extending that screening all the way across the south boundary.
And none of that is required under the Solar Siting Act? You were just doing it to be a good neighbor?
Correct.
Okay. Now, there's been a lot of talk about native pollinator species. One of the things that we are permitted to control under the Illinois Solar Siting Act is requirement with the IDNR pollinator scorecard. Would you be consenting to a condition imposing IDNR pollinator scorecard management and maintenance requirements?
Yes.
Okay. And just to be clear, the pollinator scorecard requires a land management plan that is very consistent with what we used to require as a county regarding the use of herbicides and pesticides and things like that to make sure that the state of the groundwater is maintained. Oh, and I wanted to go back to the study that you had cited on solar property values. Can you pull up the chart, Kim, that came with that? This one. So, of the LaSalle County is a 200, or is a 20 megawatt site. This is a 5 megawatt site. Can you tell me a little bit about what the difference in acreage are for those sites? Because a 5 megawatt site is generally how many acres versus a very large megawatt site?
Well, I will just point to the acreage that's listed right there in the study. It's 158 acres.
Oh, I'm
and this-
sorry.
Oh, no, totally fine.
So it's much larger than what we're proposing in this case.
Correct,
And this study covered sizes, all different size projects.
correct.
Cool.
And I should just, if I could add, one of the reasons that there's not a longer list for Illinois projects is just the number 2 project listed up there on the list, Grand Ridge Solar. That's I believe, the longest operating solar project in the state. So I think it makes general sense that you don't have sales around these projects until they've been operating for a while. So for example, there's a larger project just north of Springfield. I drove by it on the way up here. It's a 70 megawatt project, so quite a few more acres, but it's been operating for about 2 years now. So I don't believe there are a large number, if any, of sales or qualifying sales that could be studied to, evaluate for purposes of a study like this.
Right, well, and your study also talked to the Rockford assessor, and Rockford has many more solar farms actually operating than McHenry County at this point that are located in residential areas. And that assessor had no problem with it.
Correct.
Okay. I think that concludes my questions for the petitioner.
Before I continue with the board members, Kim, you stepped out for a moment, but I just wanted you to address to the audience and, the state legislation that has impacted our ability to limit the location of solar farms.
Yeah, so if you're not aware, the state of Illinois did pass legislation in January of 2023, basically outlining siting standards for commercial solar facilities, with the understanding that counties cannot deny these projects as long as they meet the minimum requirements, including the setback from residential properties, from the panels to the property lines, those distances. So as long as those minimum requirements of the state are met, the county board would not have the ability to deny the projects.
And does this project meet those requirements?
It does.
And so we can do things like buffering and seed species and stormwater and that sort of thing, but we can't deny a petition.
Correct.
Just wanted to be clear on that. Okay, we'll move on.
Okay, thanks. I found your presentation pretty thorough, especially when it comes to the landscape buffer going above and beyond. My only question is an easy one. As I've asked other developers in the past, just want to make sure you're not planning on a cyclone fence, and we're probably planning on the agricultural style. That seems to be,
Yes.
that's it, thank you.
Ms. Becker?
Yes, you mentioned that the tax revenue for the property would be 27 times what it is now
In year one.
in year one. What is it now?
I have it in my computer if you'll allow me to look it up.
Sure.
It's currently taxed as agricultural land, correct?
Correct. Yep. Sorry. If you want to ask other questions while I pull this up, please feel free. 'Cause I don't
Okay.
know.
What type of maintenance is needed for the plantings that you're planning on putting in? Is it like weekly mowing or monthly mowing or sheep coming in and eating what isn't?
Yeah, it would be mowing just to make sure that it's not growing up taller than where the panels are so that they're, or, you know, any of the mechanisms that they can actually service the trackers or the panels that they need to. So,
How often would that happen?
it depends on how much rain we're getting and,
Well, typically, what would it be?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Under the IDNR, they can only mow less than 10 times a year.
Thank you.
Okay, but 10 times a year if it's all in the summer.
But if they're growing native
It's a lot.
species, you really only need to mow 3 times in the first 5 years. Like 3 times per year in the first 5 years.
Okay. Until they're established.
Right, and then it's
Yeah.
less, it gets less the more they establish.
Okay.
Well, I just wanted to chime in, if we do agree to a condition that stipulates that we follow the pollinator scorecard, there's maintenance requirements in that scorecard as well, that are intended to help the plants flourish and reduce mowing.
Right, and I understand that.
Oh, okay, great.
And like I said, 10 times a year seems, pretty scant unless it's all within the 2-month summer period, then it could be a lot for people living around there. I'm just wondering how often they would hear, it would be a mower, is that right?
I assume.
Yeah.
And I will just tell you, in my experience, it's typically not more than once a month. And in particular, in the spring, there's a disincentive to mow because you want for the native pollinator plants, you want them to get to a certain height so they can properly propagate. So there's typically not a lot of mowing in the spring until they get to a certain height. And I will just say also that I am not I am not an expert on these issues.
Okay, well, I'm just, thinking of the surrounding residents and what they'll have to deal with, aside from the array itself. But, everybody has to mow, so there's always that noise no matter what. And hopefully they won't be coming in with those god-awful blowers and blowing things away. So that noise would be alleviated. What type of fence are you planning on putting up there? Where?
It's a 7-foot height and then
We're happy to do an agricultural fence as was mentioned, and then I'm gonna go back and talk about that wildlife adjustment to allow wildlife to go underneath.
So when you say agricultural fence, what are you referring to? Like a chain link fence or the square wire type fence with the wood?
I'm referring to the square wire, if you would prefer chain link, more
No.
flexible, okay.
In the county, we prefer the regular wire with the, okay. Now, about the decommissioning. Let's say, for instance, this project starts up, goes great for a year or two, but then for whatever reason has to shut down. You're still bound by the decommissioning agreement, is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so even if it's 6 months, you still have to do all of that. You have to restore everything.
Even if it never operates, in some weird world where it was built and then never operates, we would be bound by the decommissioning agreement.
Okay. And do you know what's growing on the property right now?
I don't think anything's growing on it right now. I don't know what would be planted.
I thought you said it was currently farmed.
Oh, I thought you meant
but it's-
this today.
Smart.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, normally.
Sorry.
When we were,
What year is this?
when we were there in the fall for the wetland survey, there was corn.
It's corn.
It was corn, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Eldridge.
Thank you. I presume that you will require an Army Corps permit for the jurisdictional wetland before you put this together?
We would require that if we were going to impact the wetland at all. But since we're not, then we will pursue a no permit required letter from the Army
Okay,
Corps.
but in any case, you have to get approval from them before you
Correct.
do anything.
Yeah.
With regard to access to the site, the only vehicle access will be the driveway more or less in the center of the property from east to west.
That's right.
Along Lucas Road. And it looks like a very short area just to access those equipment pads.
Correct.
And there'll be no other equipment except the inverters located on those pads, is that correct? And 3 or 4 poles, I presume.
Yeah, that's right.
Are the panels fixed or will they move?
Single
They
access.
move. And what power is used to move them? Is that an electric motor or what does that?
I believe it's an electric motor. I'm not being an engineer, but I believe it's an electric motor.
Okay. Is it noisy?
No. To my knowledge, no, it's not. When we were considering noise, our main concern are the inverters. That's the noise that we study.
Okay, so it's, my experience with them has been sort of a low hum that you can't hear very far away. Is that, would you say that that's characteristic?
That's correct.
Okay.
It is a negligible amount of sound.
And the sound from the inverters is equivalent perhaps to a vehicle moving by on the road at the site of the inverter.
Right, I've heard it described as a refrigerator, if you're near an in-home refrigerator.
Okay, so it's not a buzzsaw or a jackhammer level of sound?
No.
Okay. That's all I have.
Mr. Cozen.
Thank you. How many panels are expected to be installed on the site?
So we typically wouldn't get into the actual number of panels to work
Okay.
with final engineering because we would be partnering with the operator who would ultimately decide which panel they want to purchase.
Oh, I see. So you're not the installer of the solar field,
That's correct, we are not.
the installer. So that's,
We work with a PPC contractor who installs the field.
So questions relative to panel numbers, types, operational conditions would not be apropos to you, but subsequent in the process.
Well, as we get into final engineering with the building permit and everything, we would have that number.
Right,
We
but
just have more
not today. And therefore then, likewise for the description components for the equipment pad, you would not be able to give details to that.
My understanding from our engineers is that the equipment pad and the inverters, that is what will be used. I don't think.
But I mean
that's my
in
understanding.
details of the type of inverter.
Oh, the type,
Right.
no, yeah, that's right, we wouldn't know that.
One of the questions that I have an interest in is the cooling oil used for the inverter, as well as the proximity of the inverter into the detail location of the panels. But that would be in engineering design.
Correct, thank you.
Also similarly for the gearbox for the panels, that would again be something that your designer would address. As well as recognizing that having some 45 rows of panels, you would have at least 45 gearboxes or somewhere an equivalent of several hundred operating gearboxes, but type and kind again would be something that you would get into your design.
Correct, at a later phase.
Would you know if the panels are dual face? I don't know if that, and
They're not, to my knowledge.
there was a photo of panels with grasslands. What was the source of that photo in the display? Was that in Illinois? Was that 2 years ago?
That is a good question. If you're referring to my,
The illustration of how grasslands look in the area of panels.
yeah, I could not tell you definitively where that photo was from. I apologize. I got that from a partner of mine that has.
Okay, but we shouldn't attribute that to something that would likely to occur within 2-3 years of the site.
Right.
Does the, to those who you are affiliated with, do they have an automatic performance monitoring of the site?
There is ongoing 24/7 remote monitoring of the site.
And where is the reporting station or the central station for such monitoring?
That, I think, is something we would again get into with the operator.
So it is possible it could be outside Illinois.
I have no knowledge of that.
Do you have any operating facilities presently in Illinois?
We do not, because we've only just gotten involved with this second round of legislation.
So you have not yet secured a service maintenance team in Illinois?
Not that I'm aware of,
Do you have a grassland maintenance team in Illinois?
not that I'm aware of.
Do you presently partner, whether in Illinois or nearby, well, we'll limit it to Illinois then, a subscription service for residential subscription of the energy that would be?
The subscription is through ComEd, so it's some other programs you may have seen, the project would go out and get subscribers. In this case, subscribers would sign up through ComEd.
And I don't know if this line is appropriate, and I stand corrected if the chair wishes to. Counselor, are you familiar with the approval standards for conditional use in McHenry County under the zoning ordinance as much as you understand it?
Yes. I mean, if you're referring to UDO section 16.20.04, yes.
E5?
Well, I might need you to ask me more specifics about which one that is. I don't know if I have it labeled.
Mr.
E5.
Cozen, the general standards for conditional use, is that what you're referring to?
Yes, E5 goes
Yeah,
through.
the state's attorney's office has told us that for solar farms, we don't need to address those.
Thank you.
That they're
Then that will
taken care of
shorten my
through the
length of
state law.
questioning.
Mhm.
Then I have no further questions. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, Council.
Mr. Churs.
Thank you. I guess I just learned from my associate here, this is your first attempt to do one in Illinois?
No. We are working on many projects in Illinois right now.
Okay.
There's not constructed.
All right, so are you aware of that most villages and municipalities of any substance have comprehensive land use plan?
Yes.
How many villages are you within a stone's throw of?
For this project or all projects?
No, for Lucas Road.
I will answer that. I think notice was sent to Crystal Lake and Woodstock.
Well, you've got Woodstock about 500 feet away, you got Crystal Lake about 1,300 feet away, and it looks like Lakewood comes in along the side edge of Crystal Lake, which is maybe 2,000 feet away. Municipalities have a 1.5 mile planning jurisdiction around their surveyed boundaries. Do you have a copy of those comprehensive land use plans for those 3 municipalities? Or have you read them? Have you looked at their maps?
I've read Woodstock and Crystal Lake. I have not read Lakewood.
All right, well, Lakewood's right in there too. Okay, is this in the Door Township Highway District or the McHenry County Highway District?
I can refer to my notes if you.
Lucas Road. You don't
Is
know.
it county road or is it township?
Oh, I think it's a township road, is my understanding.
Be Door Township.
Yes.
Okay. Have you consulted with anybody from Door Township?
I had a brief informational call and they said, come back when you have your discretionary.
Gotcha. What about the fire district? Is it Woodstock Rural, do you know?
I have spoken with the applicable fire department, but I have that listed in a list of notes. It was the same
I see.
thing, come back to us.
Okay, so you think it's Woodstock Rural and you've talked to them on the phone?
I have spoken to them on the phone and they told me
All right.
that they would get involved.
Is this project owned or leased?
Leased. The land is leased, the project.
How many years is your lease?
To the best of my knowledge, I believe it's a 20-year initial lease with,
How many options?
I believe it's 4 or 5-year options.
So it's a 20-year lease with 4 or 5-year options.
To the best of my
So
knowledge.
we're talking it could go 40 years. It's gonna outlive anybody in the room, right? Unless we got Toddler around.
I hope I'm.
So it could potentially go 40 years if you're signing the landlord up, for signing the tenant up for.
Correct.
Okay, I got you. So it's 20 years with 4 or 5-year options. And your application says that, well, it doesn't say. It says the conditions are no time limit. That's forever, right?
I believe that's in the ordinance.
Correct.
Yeah, it says there will be no time limit. And I've been through a lot of these things and everybody gets a time limit. We put 10 years on a 1-truck landscape.
That's a county policy.
Okay, my last question. Do you have agreements in place signed with ComEd to purchase the electricity produced on this parcel?
So we have as much as we can. We're going through the study process with them, so we can't sign the interconnection agreement until we're done.
You're
with
in the
the
study phase.
Correct.
You don't know if they're gonna buy it or not.
That's not my understanding. In order to even get into the study phase, they have to agree that there's capacity where you want to interconnect, and then you just get more granular with the interconnection requirements through the study phase.
And how many homes are within walking distance? Well, walking distance is a generic term. I can maybe walk further than a couple other people in the room. I'm not,
Be nice.
I'm not, did 35 minutes out of my road last night. How many homes would be impacted, say within a quarter mile?
I'm not aware how many homes are within a quarter mile.
Would it be 5, 10, 20?
I have no knowledge of how many homes are
Did
within.
you live in the area photo?
I have, but I made no attempt to count homes.
Thank you.
There's 5 or 6, there's 5 homes that are, directly adjacent or kitty corner to the project.
11.
I mean, directly adjacent is what I said.
11 within 1,000 feet. Thank you.
So I have just a few questions. So this is just one part of the application process, right? Getting the zoning through the county. You have to get the state, you have to go through the state selection. You have to do the ComEd connection agreement. There's other things that will have to be done before this actually takes place, correct?
Correct.
My only question is, in the NRI report by the Soil and Water Conservation District, they identified that there's 2 large oak trees in the cornfield in the southern portion of the parcel west of the wetland. And these sound like these are large, mature oak trees. Would you be preserving those in this project, working around them, trying to preserve those oak trees, or are you intending to cut them down?
They're currently proposed to be cut down. They're 2 isolated trees that are kind of right in the middle of this southeast portion of the array. There are, another number of other trees, oak trees around that wetland that we're preserving and not impacting. It's just those 2 that are, kind of just isolated away from that woodlands area.
Because it is a policy, to try and preserve mature hardwoods in our county, and if there's a way that you can work around that and preserve those oak trees. We've had other solar projects who have agreed to preserve oak trees on the edge of property and not cut them down, just so that, and construction around those oak trees can be can impact the trees as well. I'm just wondering if that's something that you would consider, or would that, crowd this so that it looks like you're really taking up as much land as you can in order to get the size facility that you need here?
I think that would be a question for me. We do try to preserve trees, especially like you said, when they're on the edges or when it's a group of trees. We have another project in this county where we're trying to preserve a large number of oaks, and we've adjusted our site plan for that. In this case, I'm told by our engineers that we do need to remove those 2 trees. Yeah, my counsel makes a great point. I'm happy to go back, after this meeting and see if there is any way to preserve those trees. But as a, non-engineer, I can't make any claims.
Okay.
There is one that's sort of at the edge, so,
Yeah, I'm happy to. I love trees, so I'm happy to discuss it, absolutely.
Yeah, that's the only thing that they, that I found that they really noted in here, that I thought I wanted to bring up to you, because sometimes there's other trees, but they're not of the top quality, and so they don't have a concern about that, but those 2 trees were of a concern for them.
I appreciate that.
Okay. Vicki, you had another question?
Yeah, I do. Did you ever get the tax information?
I didn't. My Wi-Fi hotspot is not working. Is there Wi-Fi in this building?
yes,
Okay, maybe I can log into that and I can give you that information.
It should be called MCGC Guest.
Awesome, thank you.
And in the meantime, is there any lighting planned for this property?
there's no lighting,
None,
there's no lighting proposed.
none at all?
Correct.
Okay.
Does staff have any questions?
I do not.
Madam Chair, I did have a question for staff.
Okay.
Did
We'll
we,
go ahead and allow questions for staff while she's looking this up.
thank you. Was there any comment from the city of Crystal Lake?
No.
Any comment from the city of Woodstock?
No.
And did any of the special service districts that are otherwise within proximity to the site make any comment?
No, we did not receive anything.
Thank you, that concludes my questions.
Linnea, can I ask questions of staff then while we're waiting?
Sure.
Okay. So just to go back to the objection letters, the Woodstock ordinance is cited. We have no way to enforce another municipality's ordinances at the county level, correct?
Correct.
We cannot delay or deny a solar farm based on current or pending legislation?
Correct.
Okay. And to the best of your knowledge, there's no previous incidents of groundwater pollution with any of the other solar farms that have been operating in the county?
Not to my knowledge.
We don't have any EPA complaints, we haven't had any problems.
No.
And the petitioner did receive a copy of our Water Resources Division staff plat memo, so they're aware of the standards noted by our Water Resources Department.
Yes, they were distributed.
Okay. And we do have a means of enforcement for maintenance or compliance with the landscape plan. We can do site inspections and site violations.
Yes.
That's all I had, thank you.
And they will go through the stormwater ordinance for, will they have to comply with the stormwater?
Yes,
ordinances?
during the permitting, they will have to get a stormwater management permit and meet all of those requirements.
Are you able to log in?
It says I'm on the internet, but when I click in all my folders, there's no material in there. So I'm guessing that this is through my company.
Oh, your firewall might be
It's just
working.
not letting me, so I could respond via email, if that's helpful.
Or could you,
Well, we have one member that's going to have to leave us at 3, and I don't know that we're going to be done at 3. So depending on what you want to do, we might not be able to vote today. You need 5 votes to be able to go to the county board with an approval, a recommendation for approval. And so Mr. Eldridge is just going to have to leave. It's his wedding anniversary, so we're going to let him leave. And Mr. Jers too is. So maybe you can bring those answers, to the tax thing, when we vote, if that would work out okay with you.
Okay.
Or provide them to us if you won't be able to be here. If that's something you'd like to do, just provide that information.
And just so I know, when would you propose to vote?
Well, it's really up to you, but you'll need 5 people, and probably by the time we vote here today, we would only have 5 people. So we would have to set a date that would be
Okay.
agreeable to you.
Understood, thank you.
All right, so at this time, we will allow anyone in the public that would like to ask a question. I have my timer on my phone. Again, come up, identify yourself, give your address, and then this is the time for questions of the petitioner. And so you're allowed 3 minutes to ask any questions. Then we'll move on to the next person. So, yeah, Jessica.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jessica Reza. I live at 11101 Lucas Road, so I'm one of the flag lots behind where the solar farm is proposed to go in. So my question is, Gloria did give us a phone call like yesterday, the day before. We got the letter from Turning Point, and I'll make a statement later. But in terms of, this is my whole front yard view with my young kids. We're raising our family in rural Woodstock. So, and there's a lot of development that's coming into Lucas Road, so I'm feeling very emotional about the land. But in terms of the fencing and the extra boundaries and the landscaping, I appreciate that you guys are making an effort for us because of the laws coming from Springfield. We have no say in this. This is a futile fight for me, right? But can you talk about just like in terms of construction and the fencing and barriers for our properties that are staring at this every day for as long as I'm in my home? Like, what does that look like? Does the fence go up first? Are you planting seeds? Like, how is that barrier going to be? Because this is, when I look out my front window and I'm outside with my kids, this is all I see in my front yard where we are. So I just would like you to talk about that, please.
Well, my understanding is that the pollinator scorecard specifically, which I'll talk about because we just mentioned it in this meeting, stipulates early, robust planting of all those pollinators. That's just my understanding. So that would probably be the first thing, would be the plants. And then honestly, I think it depends. We are so beholden to ComEd on when we can actually construct things and how quickly materials arrive. I am aware that in some cases the fence has gone up first, but I don't know that's always the case. So the real answer is I don't know.
Yeah, I think we would just request that if possible, you know, just because this is plopped in between a bunch of rural properties. It's like, that's why there's a presence here today. It's obtrusive, you know, from my perspective. So, thanks.
Does anyone else have?
Yeah. Daniel Funk, I'm at 11315 Lucas Road, so I border the west of that property entirely. Just a couple of quick questions. For the stream itself, you mentioned that it drains to the southeast, to the south. Did you guys actually look at the study of how all the water moves in that particular area? Or did you isolate to just that small wetland?
There has not been a hydrology study done on the site, so we looked at just overall topography contours to look at a high level where water would be flowing from the site. And then also the information that we received from the Natural Resources Division also provided information that water is generally flowing to that wetland area.
Okay.
That would be from the Soil and Water Conservation District report, correct? Is that what you're
The information that we received.
Oh, we received via email from our water resources manager.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
Okay. Did anybody do an actual site visit during like spring or anything to actually see water flows?
When I visited, it wasn't raining.
Okay. Being the property that borders west of that, I can tell you that a lot of that water comes west onto my property. Our retention pond is actually the lowest point in that area entirely, so that all comes into my drainage pond as well. That stream's important. It interconnects to a creek, which drains all the farmland property, both north of Lucas and south of Lucas. All that goes through that particular area. So I urge you to be very careful with how you're going to manage stormwater through that area. The tree line buffer
This
to
is
the
a
west.
question, right?
This is a question,
Okay.
yes. I noticed there was no tree line buffer to the west. You mentioned that there was natural vegetation there already.
Yeah.
And that you guys looked at it in the fall?
She was saying the Kimley Horton team was there in the fall to do the wetland delineation.
Okay.
We had taken some images of around that wetland area, so of that west bordering vegetation. I can't speak to it. I can follow up with my environmental partners that were there, but I just hadn't followed up with them. I was
more focused on this area around the wetland here
Okay.
when I spoke with them, so.
Fair enough. I would not categorize that as vegetation. That is overgrowth, weeds.
Am I allowed to respond with a question?
To his question?
Would you prefer if there was landscaping buffer all along the west side?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know the right answer to that.
Okay.
Your seed mix for your ground cover, obviously to the west, we own and operate a horse boarding and riding training facility. So we have a number of horses out there. Would you be open to the seed mix that you're using? Because there's certain types of grass seeds that are not good for the horses, and we'd be worried about cross-contamination.
Oh, I think that's something that our board is strictly, we are with the pollinator species. We want to protect that, whatever is the native grasses, the pollinator species that we ask for every solar farm.
Okay.
I could say though, just as a developer, if you would like to give me information and I can pass it along while we still comply, I can't guarantee we can comply with it, but I can still receive the information.
You can comply with it.
Okay, then yes, I'm very open to it.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
My name is Rosalind Tellerico. I'm at 11103 Lucas Road. Most of my questions have been answered, I would say, but the one I did have regarding the pending legislation is if that passes prior to this being started, what happens? Maybe more of a question for the board rather than you guys.
Well, as the question was asked of staff, maybe you want to answer it.
Yeah, if there's pending legislation, it would not apply because this was applied for under the current regulation. So
And I don't mean pending, if it actually passes before this is built.
Right, it's not based on when it's built, it's when they apply for the conditional use permit. So they would be held to their standards under the current law.
Okay, which to me, I mean, the state is already concerned, that's why they're overwhelmingly trying to push this through to be 500 feet versus 50 feet.
Yeah,
But we
that's
can't-
my
we can't
understanding
change
is-
it.
Okay.
I mean, it's a bill that passed a House committee, hasn't passed the House yet. I mean, I live in Springfield, so I follow these things. And so obviously that's an opinion about whether the state is overwhelmingly responding to it. I'll just say that, the siding legislation, and I don't think TPE was involved in that at all, right? That went into effect in January of last year. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether the General Assembly typically likes to change things within a year after they passed something already. I don't know. And it's.
May I make a comment?
Sure.
I have, do some lobbying for some organizations, some not-for-profit organizations, and we have been told in our trips to Springfield that legislation that has any controversy attached to it is very unlikely to be acted on in this session. That until the election is over, they're going to deal with as little as they possibly can. And that, in 60 years of doing that, that's been my experience, that this session just won't pass much. That even if it was on a hot track, it probably wouldn't get through this spring.
Well, it did pass 19-6 twice.
That's a committee.
All right, I'm just going to tell you, I paused your time for Charlie's comments, and now I'm going to let you start up again.
Okay, and it did get another supporter, so as recently as
again,
March 5th,
Yeah,
so it's.
they're bound by the law when the
Got
day
it.
they apply.
Okay, so my property sits to the south, and we do sit higher up. So we look down on that property. My question is, how tall are these panels going to be at the greatest height, and how far off the ground?
I will say they will be no more than 20 feet high per the county solar.
At their whole highest one?
That's just, it basically tracks.
And I know what 20 feet is when I work.
I'm sorry, public can't comment. You can ask a question when it's your
That's my wife.
time.
I live there.
When it's your time.
Yeah, you want one of those by your house?
This is a public hearing, you have to be respectful, please. We're being recorded.
Okay, so my point is that I do sit above that property. And in the one picture you did show there, which you asked for reference on, it does show a glare on that panel. And I do believe when the sun is setting to us, is going to be.
You have to ask a question.
Let me get to it,
Okay.
please. When the sun is setting behind me and to the south, it's shining directly on your panels. Your panels will be tilted towards my house, to accommodate that sun, to get that sun. So how will there not be glare?
All I can answer is that we use this software that's industry standard to do a glare study that projects where the sun will be and where the panels will be throughout the year.
But there's no guarantees, right, that we will not get glare.
I don't know how would we provide a guarantee that would work for you, other than doing a study.
Okay, your time is up, ma'am. Would anyone else like to ask a question? Again, this is time for questions, not comments. Yes, ma'am.
Josette Noble, 10903 Lucas. And I missed a lot of things because I couldn't hear, so pardon me if I'm asking the same thing. But it's your project, but you're not building it, you're not maintaining it. So let's say that you change something with it so we can preserve the trees. And whoever's gonna start building, oops, we cut the tree down. You know, that kind of thing. And plus, you don't know how many panels there will be. I mean, that's all for the person who's building it. I mean, there just seems like there's a lot of unknowns at this point.
Would you like me to answer?
Sure.
Regarding any commitments we make to this board, it's a matter of public record. It would be attached to the LLC, so any commitments we make, we have to transmit with the LLC. That's our business, we're in these meetings all the time. And then I will, from my knowledge being communicated to me by engineers, no one would know the number of panels at this stage of design. Any number I could give you would be specious. It would just be highly irregular to know the number of panels, regardless of whether you operate the project or not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else with a question?
Yeah, I got a couple. TJ Liebetrau, 11106 Lucas Road. We're kitty corner, northeast of where that would be. I have a few questions in limited time, so I'll just say the questions and if you could answer that after. When do you assume that you would plan to start if all your approvals take place? How long does the approval process takes? From here, are we looking at a year, 6 months? What are we looking at? Other than these oaks that are in question, are there trees that you have access to that you would be topping or removing to get more sunlight to your proposed panels? How long do you have to decommission, remove any equipment, materials, all that, once the project shuts down? Do you have 6 months? Do you have a year? How long before you gotta get all that junk out of there? The screening, I know you talked about putting in the pollinators and everything, like she was asking. For the shrubs, I think you said you were putting in, what is the initial height of those? Are you putting in seedlings, an initial height to block these people's view of that? The examples that you showed about different housing and resale and stuff like that, you showed an example of a subdivision. You're in a rural area now. People aren't looking for the same thing in a subdivision as they are in a rural area. So I'd like to know what the difference is there. Along with that, there was one that you stated that the study should not be applied to other states, and Illinois was not involved in the study. So I'm curious about that. And then there was an assumption that there will be no impact on the wetland. If the absorption from the grasses that you're putting in, if the assumption is that the absorption is going to be better, how is that not going to impact the wetland that you say is lower? So will that dry up the wetland? Will it all absorb on the north side versus the south? And then the last one is, as far as the energy that you get from these, if there's no battery banks or whatever, I'm not a solar expert, so how does ComEd get this energy? Where does it go once you get it into the panels? I guess one last question then, whoever you contract with, I know what your lease is. What's their lease? Do you have a minimum requirement that whoever's doing this with you is gonna have this 20 years and then same options? Or do they have options in that 20 years of, oh, we're only gonna do 5 years? So I think that's it. Hey, how about that?
You were good, I tell you.
So we can now respond.
Now you can respond to all his questions.
I was trying to remember, but maybe you could, if you keep your list out,
Yeah.
maybe you can just give me
I wrote it
keywords.
down.
Okay, good. The first one was about.
When would construction start?
So we are highly beholden to ComEd. Our estimate, if we are successful,
okay, we're
in
fine.
receiving these permits would be 1 to 2 years from receiving discretionary permits, would be when we would
That
start.
would be breaking ground, so to speak?
Correct.
Okay.
Will other trees be removed or topped?
I can answer that. On the west side of the parcel, there are a couple trees that are on our property. I mean, we would not obviously touch any of the trees that are not on the subject parcel. But those would be either limbed where possible or removed if needed to remove that shade buffer.
Okay.
Or, sorry, not buffer, shade from the trees.
Okay.
And Amy, once the decommissioning obligation begins, how long does the owner of the project have to complete decommissioning? I believe that's covered by the AMA, but I don't know if you know the answer to that.
I think his question was how long they have to complete the decommission process.
That's correct.
Yes, once it's triggered, how long, I think it's either 6 months or 12 months. I'm not certain.
I thought it was 12.
Thank you. I was looking at my notes to see if I had it in front of me and I don't, so I apologize.
I can look in our ordinance, but Kim, don't we have something in our
I
ordinance?
should know this off the top of my head.
I know, it's one of those things.
I think it's 12 months, but I am not positive.
It would be
think
no
so,
more
too.
than 12 months, because we think it's either 6 or 12, so.
And that's when the last piece would be out of there.
Correct.
And restored.
And we're
Well,
still.
Now,
Would be done. They would have reseeded it and made it nice.
Well, probably it's going to be returned to row cropping, then they would plow up the field. What's the height of the initial height of the trees and bushes as part of the, I think that's covered in the landscaping plan, right?
Yeah, I have this written down from our landscape architect. So the heights really depend on species selection. However, we try to specify evergreen plantings that are between 20 to 25 feet on average at maturity, and deciduous shrubs between 6 to 12 feet on average at maturity. Typical install size for evergreen trees is 5 to 6 feet, and deciduous shrubs are 4 feet. Till time maturity varies pretty dramatically. However, it is usually about 5 to 10 years before most trees are considered mature, even though they will often continue to grow just more slowly after that time.
Can I ask a question?
So for the fence is 7 feet high, your evergreens would be going in at 6.
And the purpose of planting smaller trees initially is a better success rate, because if you plant them small, they grow big and strong and they don't die and you don't have to replace them.
I just didn't want seedlings.
And then there was a question about in the property value study, the rural versus this is a rural area. There was a picture shown as an example for next to a subdivision, but I think that was one example that was provided. I'll let you finish. I believe that the letter and or the report states that there's it covers rural properties as well.
Yeah, so my response to that would be, in the study and the letter, we have a lot of conclusions that were drawn by these appraisers about rural properties, but you're correct, that subdivision is not rural.
And how does ComEd get the electricity?
It's a great question. My answer to that is going to be non-engineering, but the point of the study process is exactly that, to go to ComEd and say, we want to go the opposite of the direction that you usually go. So the short answer is the same way it gets it from any other power plant, nuclear plant, a coal plant. You have to do these extensive studies to, in an emergency situation, how much capacity could this line absorb and what do we need to do to improve that? And that would stay with the land after the project is over.
Well, and then more practically, there's something on the site plan called the point of interconnection. Maybe you can explain what that means. That's where it plugs in.
It's the point where we interconnect to the existing grid.
Didn't have to explain that.
Yeah.
That's where you plug into the electric grid, right?
So that's can I talk back with them?
No,
asking a question?
this is her
Okay.
opportunity to respond to you.
I think there's a question about the lease for the, is the lease the same for the buyer, or is it, or the operator of the project, or is it different?
So the lease is in the name of the project LLC. So it travels with everything else. It's not in my company's name or in the future company's name. That's not
You speak louder.
Oh, I'm so sorry. The lease is in the name of the project LLC. It's not in the name of Turning Point or the operator. It's only the project LLC.
So it goes with the project.
It goes with the project. You think, Kyle, to your knowledge, we've answered the question?
Oh, that was the last question I had written down.
Thank you, thanks.
Okay. Anyone else want to ask a question?
I just have two quick questions. My name is Gina Tallarico. We're at 11103 Lucas Road, so we're just to the south. And I believe there's trees or shrubs, tall trees that are at that south part of the line by the wetland. And are those planning to be removed? Or cut, trimmed down or anything?
No.
Okay. And then my second question is, the studies that you cited for the property values, do you know how close those residential areas were, or the houses, I guess, to those solar farms? Like, how close was the house to the solar panels where the values were not affected?
It was 10 studies that were cited that were done by King Resnick, and then they reviewed like so many different studies, so I don't know the distance in all of those.
Make sure they can hear.
Oh, I was basically saying I don't know because there were so many studies that were included in the report. I don't know.
I mean, is there like any kind of estimate though? Because our concern is we're like less than 50 feet from these solar panels. And if the value's not gonna be affected, I mean, compared to these studies, how close relatively are we talking? That's just my question.
Right, well, I'll just refer to the letter that was written by Mr. Lyons and dated March 19th. There's an example in that letter that shows panels 100 feet from homes. That's was discussed in the letter. I believe somewhere in the letter they refer to the Tallarico residence. The site plan, based on the site plan provided, the distance between the closest panel, and am I pronouncing that correct? Tallarico? Okay, thank you. The Tallarico residence is 225 feet. This exceeds the setback requirements in McHenry County. And it says Cone Resnick has studied numerous properties that have sold within 200 feet or less of solar panels that were not negatively impacted by the adjacent solar facility.
Anyone else?
I had written down one other question that the gentleman previously had asked, so I can answer.
Sorry, it was not my intention to
I think
skip
it was his
it.
very last question, maybe not. But about the wetland, and I thought it was a good question. So he had asked if the absorption rate just generally throughout the array is going to increase because of the natives, wouldn't that negatively impact that wetland? And I can just say it is not anticipated. We would not anticipate to negatively impact that wetland. As we said, I think it would positively impact the aquifer in that area, and it would not in any way negatively impact that wetland. And so providing just more of a natural filtration rate in the area around that wetland would only, if anything, benefit that wetland area.
I have to follow up. And you had two different seed mixes chosen for the site. You had regular prairie seed mixes, and then you had the mesic, the wetter soil seed mixes, to make sure that you were compensating for the different soils on site based on one of your slides, right?
Right, for those agricultural wetlands that are dotted throughout. Yeah.
And also the Army Corps of Engineers, the letter that you have to get, they would want to make sure that that wetland would not be negatively impacted in order to get your okay for the project, correct?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. Any other question? Okay, at this time then we'll go to testimony from staff and give us their report.
For the record, I'm Tim Middleton, at Mr. Alvarez, left meeting at 3:02 p.m.
Okay, so we've discussed some of the surrounding uses, the subject properties, agricultural land use. Surrounding is residential and agricultural uses. All of the properties surrounding the subject property are zoned A1 agricultural.
The future land use map designation for the property and the entire area is residential. So at the end of the life of the solar project, if it's deemed appropriate to go to residential, could potentially be to that or return to agriculture at that time after decommissioning. I know we mentioned the adjacent municipal plans. Woodstock is the only one that had a designation. That was also for neighborhood development. Both Crystal Lake and Lakewood did not have any designation for this project site for future development. I believe all of the state regulations have been met, and staff does not have any objection to the approval.
And the standards, the principal use standards have been met?
Yes. I did want to just mention too, if the only thing that you were needing from the applicant was the tax, you were looking for the current tax amount on the property?
Yeah, you probably have
I
that.
can pull up the tax bill if that saves them from having to come back to another meeting. Just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, if you want to do that while we're getting comments from the public, that would be great. Okay, so at this time, we'll take comments from the public. Again, your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to give whatever comments you have on the project. So anyone would want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. Dan Funk, 11315 Lucas Road. On the comment section, you'd mentioned that you do community and investments. So I would just ask if, is that gonna be for the county, is it gonna be for the city of Woodstock, will it be just Door Township? You know, what would that be, what would that look like, and what kind of programs would you be doing in a rural area that doesn't really have anybody doing any kind of outreach today? That would be one comment. The other, general comment, I would ask that if you're gonna remove any trees, that you look to replant maybe two to one somewhere on the property. That would be a good start for me as well. You mentioned that the west side of the property, you're gonna look at that vegetation and do some limbing and open up that shade area. My comment there is, you didn't put in any kind of visual buffer on the west side of the property entirely, because you said that vegetation was there, but then later on you said you may cut a lot of that down to get rid of shade. So I'm a little concerned about that. From my view, my house faces directly east. You know, so from my front room, that's the view I would have is that. Really concerned about the drainage scenario over there. I've been on that property for 20 years. You know, we have fought drainage issues all 20 of those years. We've recently redone all the drainage on our property. We know there are drainage issues on that property that you're looking at, that particular parcel. That stream that connects to a creek, all of those lands drain into that creek, and then that feeds over to 47, and it goes up north to the Kishwaukee Headwater. It's really critical to all the agricultural operations around that area that the groundwater issues really be dealt with. So I urge you to make that a priority in your project. You also mentioned that you have a 20-year lease with 4 5-year renewal potentials. I would just ask, how old is the landowner now? Is he even gonna live that long? You know, to see that lease all the way through, and then what happens if that goes into probate or anything like that? How does that impact your lease? Did you guys do anything about that in the lease agreement? In general, I'm opposed to the project. One, to me, 5 megawatts seems rather small. Obviously, it's basically in my backyard. And while your study said that it doesn't really impact rural pricing and all that, I think that's too subjective in any kind of study to determine whether that's a real impact or not.
Okay, before we take your next comment, we have the taxes. You see that, Vicki?
Yes.
Okay, so we have that, so we know what the taxes are currently on this property. There's 2 parcels, so it would be like $1,428, right?
Something like that, yeah.
$29.
The total.
Yeah, $1,429. Okay.
Thank you.
Can you bring up the site plan again?
While she was doing that, again, for the record, I'm gonna note that Mr. Jersey left at 3:08.
So, the engineer, forgive me, your name again?
Amy.
Amy, yes. So Amy, where you were talking about clearing some trees on the west side, was that the southwest portion, or was that up near this gentleman's property?
Again, I can point and
Yes, that would be
explain
great.
at the same time. And it is on the landscape plan too, but I think this helps with the area. But you can see, there's just a couple areas where the trees, this tree line is like bowing out and these trees that are directly located on the subject parcel, are proposed to either be limbed or removed.
It's not anywhere near his buildings or where he has a view or anything like that? And it's
Correct.
on your property?
Thank you. The area that is up closer to the residential home and Lucas Road in that northwest portion, even the trees that are on the subject parcel, we're not proposing to remove those to preserve as much of that natural screening in that area as we can.
Okay, thank you. And just for your benefit, sir, I understand, I'm also a farmer, and that's the whole reason we have this ag mitigation agreement with the Department of Ag, so that there's a drainage tile survey done and all the drain tile has to be maintained so that it doesn't impact any neighboring. That's part of the drainage laws in Illinois, but that's also why the state requires that and we require that as part of our ordinance. So just wanted to go through that. Okay, next person.
Okay, I'm Jessica Rizza, 11101 Lucas Road, and I'm opposed to the project just to the proximity to my home. So I would just ask the developer, I mean, my kids run and play and ride their bikes. I am not opposed to solar farms or the work you are doing. I'll make that very clear. I'm just opposed to the placement of this in a rural area surrounding rural homes and impacting my home. So, in terms of increasing setbacks to my house, the Tellerico home, the Funk's home, we're right there if that would be something you would consider, along with, I appreciate the extra buffers, anything you can do to have the open space and integrity remain in this area in Woodstock. You know what, we're getting hit with a lot of development in this area, so that's why we're here advocating for it, because it's just a lot going on. And so I'm just strongly opposed to this project. I just need to put it on record. But I do understand that if you meet setback requirements in the state of Illinois, it's going through. So it is what it is, but in terms of this, just very opposed to the project. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Rosalind Tellerico again, 11103 Lucas. There are many reasons why we oppose it. It's obviously in our front yard where we have the pastures right there. We're just constantly there. It's going to be a visual eyesore for us. Mostly the loss for us of the right to enjoyment of our homes, specifically from negative visual impact, stigma effect, and noise and glare concerns. They are unappealing and disruptive to the surrounding landscape. Environmental impact and land use changes, the conversion of agricultural, basically, or undeveloped land into industrial zones for solar energy, it just negatively impacts the value of our homes. I truly believe it. There was, for every study you have, I have a study that says otherwise. So it's just, very negative impacts from both a visual and a value perspective. Also, there are potential dangers of living so close to the development. We don't know that yet. These are all rapidly changing, and right now, we don't know what the harm is to these things. If something leaches into our water, into our ground, we won't know until it's too late. So, for those reasons, I hope you do not approve this.
Anyone else want to give a comment? Do you have a closing statement, sir?
Should we, before we do that, could I ask if the intention is to continue the hearing to another later date, or?
Well, again, it's your prerogative, but you need 5 positive votes going to the county board. So if you want to vote today, we could do that. You still have 5 people here. It's up to you. If you want to wait.
Can I ask a question of staff?
Sure.
So I know we had loosely discussed this meeting so that then we could be heard at the county board in April. If we were to continue this meeting, how would that affect when we would be seen at the county board?
So it depends on what date you continue to. We only have one other available date in March that I'm sure that, which is tomorrow. And I don't know if everybody would be here for that. That would get you on the April county board. Otherwise, we would have to continue to an April continuation date. Would put you in May for a county board. But yeah, it's completely up to you. If you want to have a vote with 5 members, you can.
Could I be allowed to confer with council for just a moment?
The implication is if they go with no recommendation, the board is
Just to be clear, I don't know if that makes any impact to you, but even if you don't have 5 positive votes, if one person says no, it still has to be approved by the county board. So it just means that it would go to the county board with no recommendation as opposed to a recommendation for approval.
Could I just ask do you know off the top of the head, the date of the May county board?
The May, yeah.
Thank you so much.
It would be May 21st.
One moment, I'm just checking a date I'm bound by. Just one moment.
We should do it today.
Okay. We will have a vote today.
Yeah, well, we'd like to request one.
Yes, please.
So requesting statement first.
Thank you. And just so we're clear, the reason I wanted to ask that question is because if you're gonna vote on a different date, I was going to ask to do a closing statement on that other date.
Right.
I see.
But since we're ready to proceed to deliberation and vote today, I'd like to go ahead and briefly give a closing statement.
Certainly.
With your permission, I'll begin. It's gonna be very short. We believe, on behalf of the applicant, we believe as staff has already concluded, the applicant meets the standards in both the statute as well as the McHenry County ordinance. And I would submit that, and I'm not going to take you through these, but I would submit that the project also has demonstrated sufficient evidence to show that it meets the standards in the ordinance that I think was discussed involving the state's attorney. The portion of the ordinance that the state's attorney said you didn't really have to worry about. I will say that the project was designed to meet those standards and as well, and that's included in the application narrative. I think from the testimony you heard today, as well as the additional evidence, you heard that, again, those standards have been met, but also that there's been no counter evidence submitted by the folks who were making objections. And they certainly provided opinions, and I respect those opinions. But I want to point out that I don't believe we heard from anyone and they certainly didn't say if they did, but I don't think we heard from anyone who's a licensed appraiser in the state of Illinois as compared to Mr. Lyons, who submitted the report and the supplemental letter responding to some of the items raised the objection. And then I think that some of the concerns that were raised, again, many of them are valid concerns, but they will be addressed at a subsequent part of the process, such as we heard about the SWIP, the stormwater construction permit. We heard about some of the other requirements that are imposed later on during the development of a project like this or any construction project. So in summary, I'd just like to thank the board for your time and your efforts in reviewing the materials, and once again submit that on behalf of the applicant, we believe that We believe that the applicant has met the standards required for issuance of a conditional use permit and agree with staff that those standards have been met. And thank you again.
Okay, so we're going to close the hearing portion of this meeting and we'll move on to the voting portion. Again, this is for application 2024-006, a request for a conditional use permit to allow for a commercial solar energy facility. PIN number 13-28-200-013, located on Lucas Road in Woodstock, and the applicant is Turning Point Energy, ILMH 459-LLC. We have some proposed conditions. I'll read them off. Number 1, the conditional use shall have no time limit unless the use is abandoned, as specified in 16.56.030.pp.4 of the McHenry County Unified Development Ordinance. Number 2, site development shall be in substantial conformance with the site plan prepared by Kimley Horn, dated November 16, 2023, and received by the Department of Planning and Development on February 20, 2024, attached. Number 3, the decommissioning plan shall be applicable in part as well as in whole. If any portion of the commercial solar energy facility ceases to perform its intended function for more than 12 consecutive months, that portion of the facility shall be decommissioned in compliance with all the terms of the decommissioning plan. Number 4, a McHenry County stormwater management permit shall be secured prior to construction. Any damaged drainage tile shall be repaired at the expense of the petitioner and in a manner satisfactory to the Water Resources Division Manager. Number 5, a detailed landscape plan illustrating compliance with required landscape screening standards shall be approved by the zoning enforcement officer prior to issuance of a construction/building permit. Number 6, fencing shall be provided in compliance with the National Electrical Code as applicable. The use of barbed wire is prohibited. Setting fence posts in concrete is prohibited, except for gate posts and where otherwise required for stability. Number 7, the recommendations made by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources in their October 17, 2023 letter to the applicants with regard to protected resources in the vicinity of the project location shall be followed. Number 8, all requirements of McHenry County Unified Development Ordinance 16.56.030.pp as amended, subject to State of Illinois Public Act 102-1123 and Public Act 103-0580 shall be met or exceeded unless specifically amended by this conditional use permit. Number 9, all other federal, state, and local laws shall be met. Are there any other proposed conditions?
I would like to make a proposed amendment to condition number 5 to include with required landscape screening standards and consistent with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources pollinator scorecard requirements.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved by Ms. Beverly, seconded by Ms. Gartner. Discussion, Ms. Beverly.
This is consistent with the testimony of the petitioner regarding their intention. This is also consistent with best land management practices governed by Illinois State Department of Natural Resources, but it's also contained in state law. So it does provide some mode of protection and consistency in land management standards for the site.
Any other discussion? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
I say aye. Opposed? Okay, that amendment passes. Any other proposed conditions? I would like to propose.
The proposal was then aye in favor and aye in opposition.
Oh.
No, thank you. So I apologize for the delay. It was aye in favor.
Favor, okay.
Thank you. I should have called for maybe an individual vote. Okay. I would propose a condition saying that petitioner should make all possible efforts all reasonable efforts to preserve the 2 mature oak trees within the area for the panels, if that's possible.
I'll second.
And I'm just putting that in there so that it's on the record, so that the petitioner, if they can do it, they will do it. And so that's my reasoning.
Would you allow further discussion on your point?
Sure.
Thank you. The interest in your point, thank you for bringing it up, and that is attributable to my distraction, is that when the oak trees were identified not being along the road right away, but their location was identified in the southwest corner, and given their attributable age, that turned out to be the southwest corner or the northeast corner of the east half of the section. Such oak trees at the time were referred to, and are referred to in this county, as monument trees. It was a common practice of the time to locate section lines and to install reference points, especially at locations of the Public Land Survey System established in this area in 1836. There are many things that we are talking about 40 years. These oak trees have far exceeded that time and are likely to remain still standing after whatever technology we're applying at this point. And so with that, I will be supporting the chairman's motion, and again impressed that every effort be made with the technology at your disposal to allow them to still stand after you have gone.
I have an additional comment. It does give me pause as far as the Illinois Solar Siting Act requirements to include that condition. However, it is equivocal in that reasonable could mean taking a look at your setbacks, or it could mean taking a look at your engineering proposals and just having another look at it. It's not a demand.
Yes, it's not a demand, it's a request to see if it's a reasonable effort. Okay, I'll call for the vote on that. We'll just go down the line, so I don't screw that. So, Ms. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Cozen?
Yes.
Mr. Schnabel?
Yes.
Ms. Beverly?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, so that amendment is included. So at this time, I would take a motion to approve all the conditions.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion made by Ms. Gardner, seconded by Ms. Beverly to approve the conditions. Any discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Cozen?
Yes.
Mr. Schnabel?
Yes.
Ms. Beverly?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, so that's 5-0 approving the conditions. At this time, I would approve a motion for the request.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion's been made by Ms. Beverly, seconded by Ms. Gardner. Discussion, Ms. Beverly.
This is one of the better solar farm plans that we've seen in the last 6 months. These solar farms are required by Illinois state law to be passed. This company has dedicated itself to actually doing outreach with the neighbors, has maintained that they will be in consultation with the neighbors throughout development process, is open to adhering to our somewhat stringent landscape management ordinance plans, and has done this in the past. We have seen multiple projects from people who have never put up a solar farm before and who are coming before us to try it now, and this company has experience and has put forth a plan that provides for more screening and buffering than is required by state law that we could require of them ourselves. Therefore, I'm in favor of this petition.
Mr. Schnabel.
Yeah, I largely agree, and agree with protection on the oaks is something we should definitely try to adhere with.
Ms. Gardner.
I appreciate your presentation. I know you answered as many questions as you could. There's probably many more questions in the minds of the people in the public sitting behind you that haven't been answered, and that's a scary thing for people. I do urge you to stay in contact with the neighbors, to be good neighbors, and to make every compensation that you can for them, because indeed they will have to live with it, you won't. As far as real estate values, there are many opinions on both sides of it will devalue your home or it won't devalue your home. Nobody says it's gonna make your home more valuable. Let me put it that way. That's not even a possibility. But there's no way to determine that that is a fact, that your home will be less valuable. You'll have to look at it, but your neighbor, the farmer, has decided to lease this land out. It's his land, he can do what he wants. Let's just say 200 years ago, you had a house where you have it right now, and there was nothing behind you but trees, 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 just beautiful, huge, gorgeous trees. And along comes somebody and buys that land and cuts every tree down to make a farm. And you're so upset because all you can look at now is row after row after row of the same leaves. It's kind of the same thing. I know that doesn't make you feel good, but that's the way it is. Change is always hard. In any case, many of these aren't actually built. It's not 100% that this will happen. It still has a lot of steps to go before that is a possibility. I trust that this company will do everything in its power to follow through on all of its promises and do the very best that it can and keep in touch with you all. And having said all that, I'm in favor. I don't have any choice.
Mr. Cozen.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My first comment is that I appreciate the attendance of the public. This tells us that the process is working and has reached people and have provided a point of reference, because there is an adage that somehow continues to be lost, that one can trust but verify. There is a substantial public record before us, easily accessible, one that does not have to require a trip all the way down to the hinterland of Sangamon County or points elsewhere, and can be drawn forward as the years gone forth to determine whether or not the landscaping was put in, the quietness of the hours, the other terms and conditions that have been imposed, but more so to the applicant. I can only stress that what you brought forward is a thorough record and will be examined by others in that end of it. And I am the least most severe that you may be going through the process. So I will be supporting this record.
And I also appreciate the efforts made by the petitioner to try and increase beyond our requirements, to increase the buffers to the surrounding neighbors, to add more screening, to make it more palatable to them so that they're not having to look at the panels. So I think that the petitioner has done everything required of them. And I think the conditions that we have placed on this also make sure that they follow through with what they say they're going to do and protect the water, protect the land. You know, the things that we have in our ordinance have been pretty strict on solar farms. And so we're doing all that we can to protect the land and protect the neighbors. And so we feel
You ain't
that,
doing enough to protect the neighbors.
I feel that.
They could go put this place in a big
Excuse me, sir.
field, not
This
put
is,
all the
you can
people.
leave and be quiet right
Somebody
now.
should just fire all you people.
Please, sir.
You're all full of shit.
So I'm in favor
Come
of the
over there and you
request.
can see how close that fucking field is.
I'll call for the vote. Ms. Gardner.
Yes.
Mr. Cozen.
Yes.
Mr. Schnabel.
Yes.
Ms. Beverly.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. This goes to the county board with a 5-0 vote. Thank you. And thank you to all the rest of the public for being